Okay. So, 1 minute. This admitting business. Okay. So, in the last class, just to revise, we spoke about the optimal or socially efficient level of output. How do you determine the socially efficient level of output? But we are concerned with socially efficient level of emission. Okay, so the process of obtaining the marginal demand function and the marginal emission benefit function we did last time, and then from there we got the marginal abatement cost function also. By combining marginal abatement cost function and the marginal damage function, we got the socially efficient or socially optimal, you can call it optimal level of output. Okay, so this is the last diagram we took into consideration. So I hope you remember this. Okay, yes or no? Those who are there in the class at least can respond. Yeah, yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, okay. So, in this diagram also, just for the sake of continuity, I'll just explain that you have marginal abatement cost function, which we read from right to left along the x-axis, and on the same axis we are measuring emission, but emission is measured from left to right. Okay, so emission. So as the emission increases, you can see that the damage function is upward rising, and the area under damage curve is indicated by shading of this particular part. Okay, so one is light shaded and one is dark over here. So currently for the given level of out emission, E3, the damages are indicated by a small triangle. Let me take you another diagram where so let's take this diagram where we are talking about the area under the damage function as the total damages, and as the emission increases, the damages also increase. On the other hand, you are reading the abatement cost along the x-axis, but it is read from right to left. So as the emissions are reduced, or if you want to reduce the emission, then will have to incur cost on abatement. Okay, switching over to better fuel or better input mix or greener technology and so on. These are the ways to reduce emission, or these are the ways in which you will incur cost, which is called as abatement cost. So abatement cost is the cost incurred to adopt to better technology or better fuel or better energy so that the emissions are reduced. So if you are told to reduce your current level of emission from EU to say lower levels, then you will have to incur the abatement cost. So this is lighter shade over here is the cost that is incurred. Okay. So it is the cost that is incurred. So goes on increasing. On the other hand, if you have output, in emission level, which is equivalent to EU, then without taking abatement into consideration, your total damage would have been the area under the marginal damage function. So this entire triangle would have been the area under the damage curve, so damage function. However, now that you have reduced the emissions from EU to E1, you'll realize that damages have gone down. So what are the damages? The damages here are the damages caused to others. Okay, these are the hidden costs, or these are the external costs which the production activity has incurred. These are the costs inflicted on others. So if you take the example of a paper mill, and fishermen activities, okay, of catching fish, which is their livelihood, when the pollution is created by the factory or the paper mill owner, then it disturbs the business for the, or it reduces the business for the fishermen. So this is the reduction in the business in terms of value. That is the damage that we take into consideration. So when we talk about the damages, we always talk about the damages in monetary terms. Okay, so all the damages are measured. 1 minute. All the damages are measured in monetary terms. Okay, so you can see in this diagram you have E1 as the optimal level of emission or optimal level of pollution. What does that mean? At this level you have the marginal damage function intersecting with the marginal abatement cost curve, and it is at this point. So MAC is equal to MDF. Okay, any deviation from this point, you will have disequilibrium in these two. Then what happens is indicated in other diagrams. For example, in this diagram, you can see that if the emission level could be reduced to only E2, from EU to E2, I'll make this bigger. Okay. If the emission level is reduced from say EU to E2, then the damages are still very large and the abatement is very small. Means you can reduce the emissions further by incurring additional abatement costs, because at this level the damages are more than the cost. Okay, cost of abatement. So need to further reduce the emission, and hence you can go on till E1. So this is when the damages are greater than the marginal cost of reducing these damages, or marginal cost of abatement to reduce the emission further, so that damages automatically reduce. Okay, now this is another important thing, that we assume that when we are saying that as emissions increase, the damages increase, we also assume as damages go down, as emissions go down, the damages also go down. So this is one of the anatomy of the MDF function. Okay, going to the last part of it, the last diagram here, it is showing that what if you reduce the emission level further or beyond this E1 and go to E3. Okay, for this you can see that the damages are now a very small proportion. The area under the damage function shows it's a small proportion. The total damages have reduced to a small triangle which is shown in a lighter shade. Whereas, what is the cost of reducing this emission? The cost is huge. The marginal abatement cost is much higher per unit, or any incremental reduction in emission can be brought about by huge addition to cost. Okay, that is abatement cost is very high, and hence it is not advisable, because there is an opportunity cost for the every resource that you are using. Okay, and hence it is better to stop at this point where marginal abatement cost is equal to marginal damage function. This is the point at which your total damages are equal to the total abatement cost that is incurred. Okay. Is this clear? So this is called as socially optimal level of output. I have already told you that how do you evolve or what is the evolution from getting a optimal level of output, which is socially optimal level of output, to something which is socially optimal level of emission. That entire process I have explained in the class by using the functions like MDF and MAC, MEB, and so on. I hope those who were there in the class would have understood this. Okay. Now, today's class we move on to the context again, because that context we should never forget. Okay. So when we talk about the context, it is basically environmental degradation, because we are concerned with environmental quality. Okay, so when we talk about environmental degradation, the as we said, there are instances where market fails. Okay, what are the instances of market failure? First of all, public goods. Public goods are characterized, as we all are aware, are characterized by non-excludability and non-rivalry. Okay, nobody can be excluded. or the cost of exclusion is very high, or it is not feasible to exclude, or uh, it could be a government policy not to exclude anybody. Means it is not feasible to exclude anybody. And also non-rivalry, or we call it joint consumption. Joint consumption means my consumption does not reduce anybody's consumption. Those there can be a joint consumption, that is non-rivalry. Okay. Secondly, uh, so here the market fails because market will not be able to provide something at zero price, because the marginal cost for providing additional user, if it is a public good, is zero. So what will be the price? The price has to be zero, and price cannot be zero because private producers are working for profit. Okay, just a minute. Huh? Okay, so second is so that is public goods. Second is externalities. We have spoken a bit on externalities in the last class. Today we'll talk about externalities in detail. Now, again, we are not interested in externalities which do not lead to environmental degradation. Okay, why I'm saying that, because our concern is environment, public good. When we talk about, we are not talking about the night lamp, or the public good facilities which are provided by the government, and they are taking the responsibility of maintaining it. I am talking about the public good which is environmental quality. Okay, and I'm concerned with environmental degradation here. Similarly, in externalities there could be pecuniary externalities. Pecuniary externalities are basically those externalities which are having monetary implications, okay, or they're measured in monetary terms. For example, if a particular area is having infrastructural development, okay, and due to which the prices of residential properties increase, that is a pecuniary externality. So we are not interested in such pecuniary externalities. We are interested in externalities that cause environmental degradation, or externalities that is because of the external cost. And external cost are in terms of damages which are caused in the process of production or consumption to the person who is not responsible for it. So, a person who is responsible for it may not bear the cost of it, may not necessarily bear the cost of it. It is the cost which is inflicted on others, or benefits which a person is creating, but they are enjoyed by others also without making any payment for it. So, we talk about such externalities. And third area is inadequate restriction of common property resources. Now here we spoke about two kinds of resources. One is you have common property resources, and other is open access resources. So open access resources again are like public goods, okay, where excludability or excluding someone becomes very difficult because the name itself indicates the access is open. And common property resources, there can be various dimension to it. A common property resource can have limited number of users, okay, and hence common property resources can be dealt with separately as against the open access resources. So when we talk about tragedy of commons, that is open access resources, they're over exploited, nobody takes responsibility of it, nobody wants to invest in it, everybody thinks that I would like to be a free rider. That all happens mainly in case of open access resources, whereas common property resources, as the word property comes here, there are certain property rights which are defined. Those could be defined for a group, for community or a village, and so on. In that case, managing those kinds of resources has become possible. There are many examples in the world where people have devised or come up with different kinds of mechanism to deal with the common property resources. Like I'll give you example of tribals in India. Many tribals, at least in Maharashtra, I know that in Gadchiroli, Chandrapur, etc., where they want to conserve the forest. uh, they are being allowed to draw some resources, minor forest produce and all, from a particular part of the forest, which is a buffer zone. Okay. And after FRA, that is Forest Right Act, which was passed in I think 2006 or so, tribals have been given individual property rights as well as the community property rights. But tribals themselves are so conscious and conscious about the conservation of forests that they have this system of what they call as Devrai. Okay, Devrai means Rai means a forest, Vana. We say Vana Rai. Okay, so it's that part of forest which is kept for the god. Okay, what do you mean by kept for the god? it, that part of the forest they do not enter at all. Okay, so not even for taking a single fruit or anything. So it is a self what you say, they have imposed self imposed rules, I can say. They've imposed rules on themselves. The entire community has accepted it, that you allow for this part of the forest to grow on its own without even touching it. Okay, without touching it, taking any benefit from it. So the biodiversity also is allowed to flourish in that part of the forest without disturbing it. So this is managing the resources, your way of managing the resources. So, various economists and scholars have given or studied the practices across the world. You have Olson or you have Coase, then there is Robert Wade. Then I think there are two, three more names who have done these kinds of studies extensively for different communities in the world, different communities among tribal, to see what kind of practices they have to manage these resources, which are common property resources, so that there is no degradation, so that these resources are conserved. At the same time, they are able to make use of it in a sustainable manner. So many practices of the tribals are actually more sustainable than what we tell them as modern ways of conservation and so on. Like the way they cut the forest is more environmentally friendly or sustainable than what is being told to them. Okay, or what is a normal practice among others. Okay, so coming back to our topic is we will have to see how there is environmental degradation and market failure because of these characteristics of public goods, characteristics of externalities, or the common property resources. So this part we will deal with this. How to address these environmental degradation which happen in a particular context. Okay, so common property resources, I'll start with, there are three things, so I'll just start with common property resources because I am going to take this up in the end. Okay, whereas first we'll talk about public goods and externality. Now, as I said, there is a difference between common property resource and open access resource. So, there in common property resource, if you have a limited number of people who have the rights, then everybody has the right over the resource. Okay, there could be CPRs could be free or restricted rights. Now, free or restricted rights means if there is a grazing land, everybody has right, but community itself has decided some restriction. That is how the grazing will take place. Then you say that these are not rights which are unlimited rights. There are restricted rights. Okay, the community may have their own ways of regulation, and everybody has to follow it. Now, how they follow it is given by the name I forgot to mention is Ostrom, a big name, who got Nobel Prize for this work only. Ostrom's principle of how self regulation works, where there are common property resources. But if these resources are not managed well, okay, if the rules, regulations, etc., or people do not follow it, there could be failures. So there could be still a tendency to overuse or exploitation. So here tragedy of commons can happen, which is not necessarily for common property resources, but it can happen if the mechanisms fail. Okay. In this case also, the social cost of exploiting a resource exceeds the private cost, and hence there are externalities, or hence there are external costs. So externalities or external cost matter here too. So if one of the members does not violate the rules and does not follow the principles which others are following, then others will slowly fall in the same trap, and they will also start doing it. So in that case, what you are doing, the social cost of it is much more than the cost to you. Okay. So they CPRs in this sense can be equated to congestible public goods. I'll explain what is congestible public goods in a short while. I will share two diagrams with you, because or I can show the diagrams here. I have not inserted in the PPT, because yesterday I got this Pearson's text, and from that I thought that this is very useful. Okay. Uh, then you have open access CPR, open access common property resources, or you can just say open access resources. And first, there can be excess supply, but slowly it leads to scarcity. Now, to explain this, let me bring a diagram here. Are you able to see this diagram? Yes or no? Can you see this diagram?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is a simple diagram which explains that initially, look at the diagram very carefully. We are talking about the resources which are freely available and with an open access. So initially, the supply of this particular resource, it could be uh, river water, or it could be grazing land, it could be any such resource which has open access, and a large part of people can use it, or large sections of people around that land can use it. So initial supply curve is S, where the quantity can be Q1, and initial demand is only D. Okay, as initial demand is much lesser than the available supply, you see that there is a zero price. There is no intersection that is taking place between the demand and the supply curve, and hence the price can be zero. Okay, hence we say that price for public goods is zero, as there is enough for everybody. But uh, as the scarcity grows, as more and more numbers start using it, the supply reduces. Okay, you can have this as a supply curve, new supply curve, whereas as additional number of people start using it, the demand increases. Okay, then when the demand increases to D1, there is intersection between the supply and the demand curve. Initially, if you say that demand is D and D dash and supply is S, okay, then those who come before, or those who are first to start using this particular resource may get it at a lower price, but slowly the scarcity increases, and those who come later, that is the uh, upper part of the demand curve, if you take into consideration, say EF, these are the late comers, they might have to pay a higher price because the resource is overused, and also uh, very less is left, or the resource is slowly getting scarce in this context. Okay, so this means that if the open access resources are initially used by a very limited set of people and the supply is abundant, you will not have any problem, you will not have any cost. Okay, but as more and more people start using it, there is availability gets constrained, and when the availability gets constrained, slowly the price also starts increasing. You'll have to pay some price. The price could be in terms of uh, loss of business for you, not able to extract those resources, or higher cost of extraction. Technology that is used for extraction becomes costlier, as you have, as it is not easily the resource can be used for your benefit. Okay, so this happens in case of say open access resources. And the second term which is used is the congestible resources. Now, when the resources gets congestible, the congestion, of course, starts when the use is the number of users for a particular resource increase. Okay, so when we talk about a public good, where initially it is non-excluded and there is non-rivalry, but slowly due to joint consumption and more people start using it, the consumption becomes subtractable. Okay, what do you mean by consumption becomes subtractable? Initially, when expressway you have, and the number of cars are very limited, you can enjoy the ride without getting jammed, or without you being waiting in the what you say, toll checks, or toll nakas, whatever you call it, toll post you call it. Okay, there are long queues because there are many vehicles which are going on the same way. Okay, so this initial public good characteristic later on becomes a congested good because number of users have increased, and initial jointness in consumption does not remain jointness in consumption or non-rival consumption. It gets converted into subtractable consumption. Okay, every additional car will increase your time that you take to travel to your destination. Okay, so every additional car becomes a marginal user. It's like you are trying to get into a crowded train. Okay, crowded local train, and every one of us has experience of it. So when we are standing on the platform, okay, we want to get in, but once you get in, you don't want any other additional person because it's already crowded, and we start feeling that nobody should come now, it's already so crowded. Okay, so every marginal user is adding to others cost, as well as his own cost also is there. Okay, which means that he is not coming without any cost, he will also be part of that particular group which is suffering, or which is bearing extra costs for reaching a destination. That would be in terms of time, in terms of value of time. Okay, in terms of value of time, in terms of money, I mean, then in terms of additional fuel. Okay, and so on. Okay, so in this diagram what you see is initial marginal cost curve for this user A is MCA. Okay, when B is not there, when B does not come to picture. So here along the x-axis we are measuring miles a day. That is, we are talking about a travel by A and travel by B, say by car or whatever. When B comes into the picture, the cost of A increases from MCA to MC dash A, and cost of B also is higher. Okay, which means he is a marginal user, he gets along with him additional cost, so incremental cost for both of them will be higher. So these are the congestible goods. So initial approaches, the goods are abundant and there is no congestion or no rivalry in consumption. But once the use of it starts increasing, there is more and more congestion that is taking place, increasing the cost for everyone. Okay, so such instances also lead to market failure, that is allocation of resources which are inefficient. So I hope you have understood this. So we talk about these open access resources initially under excess supply, where the price could be zero, but as scarcity appears, then efficiently allocating the resources to highest valued use becomes difficult if they are in the public domain. Okay, for that you need to assign the property right. So in the diagram which I showed, On the demand curve, I could differentiate. I just I'm using the diagram. So I'm just saying that first set of users are differentiated from those who come at the end, like A first user and B comes later. A is a set of people, B is also a set of people. So B comes later and hence becomes the marginal user. So if we are able to uh, have property rights established, then there will be incentive to have some market. But it is not easy because of the nature of the good that everybody has open access. Okay, so excludability is not possible. Then it leads to inefficient use of these resources where everybody wants to be a free rider without making adequate investments. Okay. So what happens when we have such inefficiencies? The normal outcome is total investments will exceed the efficient level, okay, where you have some people interested in extracting the resources. It leads to over exploitation and it reduces yield for everybody. Like if there is additional people who get into the compartment, the comfort level for everybody reduces, the value lost to the user in future from current excess consumption. So in future these resources will not be available, so it's not a sustainable use of resources. So typical example is if you have minerals rights which are given to individuals, okay, for extracting the minerals from the surface area which is owned by them. Everybody will try to go deeper and extract more and more without thinking about the future use of it or without making a sustainable use of it. Okay. So market failure takes place in all such instances. That is, whether you take road congestion, there is a market failure. If you do not have toll roads, then people try to use these roads, and then there is congestion which is happening, and their need for regulation increases. Okay. Public goods, let's talk briefly about public goods because we are talking about environmental quality. So, whenever we are talking about public goods, please keep in mind that I am referring to environmental quality. So, these are the collective goods which are used by all. They have characteristics like non-rivalness and non-excludability. All this you have studied in public economics, so I can go little faster. There is a free rider problem. Each one of us independently, if we are asked that what is the valuation of clean drinking water, each one of us will be willing to pay a different price. But when it is provided in the public domain, we become free rider, we are not willing to pay it. So uh, that's a problem. Okay. uh, this service is very costly, and its provision generally does not depend on whether or not any single person pays. Okay, so these are the facilities, say, for example, drinking water or green spaces or open spaces, which are provided. The provision can be very costly. It is not whether dependent on what one person is ready to pay. Okay, independently or individually, we are ready to pay a price, but when it makes a combined use of it, we are not ready to contribute. There is no incentive to contribute voluntarily for production of public goods. People are not interested in making voluntary payments. Their economic incentive is missing simply because we know that others are also using it and others have not paid for it. So, national defense and lighthouse are classic examples of public goods. Let's see how we talk in terms of environmental quality. Okay. What is excludability? It is when you are able to allow selectively certain use of or certain users only to consume the goods, and it should be feasible and practical. Feasible can be technologically feasible or economically feasible, and practical to exclude somebody. Okay. A bad, there can be a public good or a public bad. Public bad, it is you can talk about excludability when it is feasible or practical to selectively allow consumers to avoid consumption of public bad. Okay, so if it is pollution, which is a public bad, can you selectively allow some people to enjoy clean air and some people not to allow clean air? Then that is a public bad which is excludable. But generally, public, when you're using the word public, it means that it is not excludable. Okay. So cost of exclusion could be very high. We may not have the technology to do it. And legal enforcement will also becomes difficult. So when we talk about property rights, remember all that excludability, enforceability, etc., becomes very important when we discuss the characteristics of environmental quality as a public good. Rivalry. Rivalry, in case of public good or bad, as we are talking about negative externalities as well as positive externality, if one person's consumption of the bad diminishes the amount of the bad available to others, then you can say that there is a negative externality. And if one person's consumption, okay, is also not able to interfere in the other person's consumption, that is a public bad, that a public good that you are talking about. Okay, so household garbage we can take is a rival bad in the sense, if a given community or in a given small locality, if household garbage is dumped by some families in the open spaces, it becomes a rival bad, because for others it will be there will be externality. Okay, or urban pollution, it is a non-rival bad. That means you cannot exclude anybody from consuming the pollution. Okay, so the excludability and rivalry, both in case of urban pollution, is very clear. Now, there could be pure public and pure private bats. What are pure public and pure private bats? Pure private bats, there is rivalry in consumption. Okay, that is in case of say indoor air pollution that affects only you. So it is a pure private bat. Okay, or you have kept garbage in your house, then it is pure private bad. It will affect only your household. Okay, whereas pure public bad are going to be water pollution in small lake where non-rivalness is there, and excludability becomes a problem. So everybody around it will get affected. Similarly, if it is greenhouse gases, it is a global public bad. Okay, which is a pure public bad, having non-excludability and non-rivalness. So these are just for understanding. Now coming to yeah, I'll have to come to externality again. But let me just explain one diagram, and that is just to make it clear that how pricing takes place for optimal provision of public goods. So as I said that each one of us, this is you, this is me, and there could be many others like this. Okay, so you have individual households, a demand for say drinking water, purified drinking water, households b demand for purified drinking water, household C demand for purified drinking water, household D demands for, and each one of us independently or individually, we are ready to pay different price for different quantity. Like 4 x1 is purchased at price 2, x2 is purchased at price 4, xi is purchased, and so on. So you have to add. Okay, so you have to add. But in case of private good, it is a horizontal summation. Like this is, I think, for private good. So you have horizontal summation of what is the quantity which people are buying at different prices. In this case, there is a vertical summation that takes place for optimal production of a public good. Okay, which means that producing, as long as society's total willingness to pay, you can see together they are paying much more than the marginal cost of it. That is, marginal cost for B is at the price that he is willing to pay is 3, and for this X asterisk quantity independently, if you take PA is ready to pay 6, and the total price that both are going to pay is 9. Okay, the marginal cost, once it is provided for everybody and it is in public domain, any additional user, it is available as zero marginal cost. So there is a vertical summation that takes place. A given quantity can be purchased at different prices, but nobody is willing to pay the price, and hence, from the point of view of the consumers, it becomes a, becomes a good which is available for all, free for all. Okay, so uh, public goods are generally characterized by this. I have explained all these characteristics. I'm sure you have done it in public economics also. So, just moving ahead with this because I want to spend some little more time on externalities again. So, if we can see it in a box type, whatever, taking the characteristics like rivalry in consumption and excludability. How do you classify these goods? Okay, so in this extreme corner, which is left hand side corner, you have private good which is high rivalry in consumption and high excludability. Chocolate that I have, chocolate that you have for yourself, or ice cream, or any such your TV, your laptop, these are all private goods, non excludable, sorry, excludable completely from others. This thing, others cannot use it, and there is rivalness in consumption. You are using it, and unless you allow, nobody can use it. Okay. Whereas this corner, you have public goods where excludability is very low or no excludability, not feasible, and rivalness in consumption is also very low. Okay. Whereas the other two, you have common resources where excludability is low because of the characteristics that there is not necessarily fencing. Okay, property rights are not clearly defined, and so on. So excludability is low, and there can be high rivalness as more and more people start using it. Okay, so an open access resource, when it becomes congestible, you have these particular problems. So these are the congested goods where excludability becomes low and rivalness is very high. Other types of goods which we haven't talked about because that is not our area of concern currently are club goods, where excludability can be high and rivalness in consumption is low. So these are cable or Wi-Fi network, etc., where excludability is high because technology permits this kind of excludability, but actually rivalness in consumption can be low. Okay, at a time many people can use it. So these are generally in the context of public goods that we discuss. Okay, coming to this part, externalities, because our entire discussion or the context is revolving around externalities or external cost which are uh, inflicted on others by the polluters. So the whole discussion of who are the polluters, who are the victims, and how to deal with this problem of victims and the polluters. Can you internalize the externality? Can you make the polluters internalize these externalities? Is the Pigouvian approach or Pigouvian fee, which we have done earlier. Okay, so these are again defined in various ways, like these are spillovers, these are the neighborhood effects, they are called it. So one needs to measure the such cost. Okay, and in the last class we saw how to measure these external costs. In the last class we saw that we have to simply take monetary valuation of the difference between the marginal social cost and the private marginal cost, and then take this cost as external cost. Okay, how easy or difficult it is a different question. Okay, now external benefits I will not do in detail, because external benefits are positive externalities. However, we are more concerned with the negative externalities. Okay, I have defined this that when utility in the utility function of an individual, there is a person or production of one person or firm is entering and changing the utility function, okay, without the permission or without any compensation, that is called as externalities. Like a fisherman's utility function is having the external cost which is imposed on him by the paper mill owner or a steel factory owner. So his utility function, his business is down by some amount, that is the external cost for him. Okay, it causes divergence between social cost and private cost, or it causes divergence between private benefits and social benefits, and the outcomes will be inefficient resource allocation. So the output has to, in case of negative externalities, the output will be much more than what it should be, and in case of positive externalities, the output will be too less than what it should be. Okay, so we that is why we say that there is inefficient resource allocation. Okay, so how to get it optimal is something that we tried yesterday by taking into consideration the marginal emission benefit function and marginal damage function and so on. Okay, now let's talk about different types of externalities. Okay, now let me first talk about these externalities. So, apart from positive and negative, in environmental context, we have to talk about two aspects. One is the sectors of origin, means where the externalities have originated, and then on whom they're impacting. So, we call it sectors of impact. Okay. So, sectors of origin, you have producers and consumers, and sectors of impact, again, you have producers and consumers. So there are different cells that we get, like in the other case we did with the excludability and rivalry or rivalness in consumption. Now let's talk about the first cell, A11. In A11, who is creator of externalities, who is imposing these external costs? Let's talk only in terms of external cost, the producer. And on whom the impact falls, it is again the producer. So you can think of an example here. So it is typically the same example, I would say, a paper mill owner and a fisherman community which is doing fishing as a business. Okay, so this is producer, or a producer is a steel factory, and another producer is a laundry owner. So steel factory having close by, then laundry owner's output, that is laundry, gets affected, its clothes are dirtied. Okay, so that is again producer. The second cell is A12, where you have sector of origin as producer. Producer has created this externality, and who is affected? The victims are consumers over here. Okay, so you can think of an example over here. So it could be a producer. Again, let's take mill owners example. And there is a community which lives in the surrounding area and uses the same stream for recreational activities. So here you have reduction in the recreational activities of the or consumption of the consumption of the community gets affected. So here you have producer, consumer as the uh, as the affected parties are consumers, and the party which is inflicting the externality is a producer. Okay. Then coming to A21, you have consumers who are creating the externality and the producer gets affected. Okay, so you can think of an example where there are cars which are on the road of consumers, cars are running on the road, and because of this the transport cost for some of the producers increases, their trucks and all are getting delayed. So that is consumers, producers cost is getting affected due to consumers' activities. Okay. Last is consumers. So here the noise that is made during uh, some festivals, okay, are affecting other consumers. So it can be noise pollution, or it can be waste which is dumped in a common spaces, and normally you have all kinds of quarrels because of it. So that is consumer externalities, or consumers are causing it and consumers are victims of it. Is this clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now we move on to the types of externalities. Now these are the types which are typically in the context of environment, and hence I would like to spend some time on it. Okay. So, what are the classifications of externalities that we are interested in looking at? These are unidirectional externalities versus reciprocal externalities, domestic externalities versus international externalities. Then you have immediate versus delayed externalities, delayed damages, tangible versus intangible damages. Let's take the examples of it. Okay. Now, if we are talking about unidirectional, means one party, a producer, is affecting, say, consumers, or one party, one producer is affecting the other producer. The other producer is not responsible for the externality. It's not, he's not responsible for the external cost or the pollution or environmental degradation. So you can talk about, say, this paper mill owner, and others are using it only for fishing, and they are not polluting it. They are doing fishing in a sustainable way. Then here this is unidirectional. Okay, or there is somebody who is at the upstream and doing the deforest. Sorry, he is cutting the forest, etc. That is involved in deforestation in a huge way. Some producer who is doing logging, and downstairs there are people who are living, and in every rain they face this flooding because cut uh, the f- the trees are cut, the forests are cut. So there is the the hills do no longer hold the um, hills, and the trees no longer hold the water that comes down and affects the community. So this is unidirectional. Unidirectional means one way externality is affecting the other party. Okay, whereas reciprocal means both parties are responsible. So in international context, generally these problems arise that two, three countries are using the same source of water. These are the big rivers which are flowing from one nation to the other nation, and both parties are actually using it and polluting it, but both parties keep blaming each other. So that is reciprocal. Okay, so it could be two paper mill owner in the same vicinity, and both are using the same stream to pollute the water. Okay. um, Second is domestic versus international. When I spoke about reciprocal and gave you the example of two, three nations, that becomes an international externality. Global warming is international externalities. All of us together are responsible for global warming or climate change. Domestic is typically the impact of it is felt at a limited geographical region. So it could be Mumbai noise pollution during, say, Ganeshotsav or other festivals. Okay, so it is domestic. It is happening, or congestion on the road. It is happening mainly in Mumbai because of the festival. Okay, or it could be Kolkata, where Durga Puja is happening. So there'll be many activities. So roads will be congested. So that is typically domestic. Okay, you can talk in terms of externalities, negative externalities in terms of, say, water pollution in a particular river, in a particular region. Okay, or acid rain, which is takes place in a particular region. So it is basically domestic in nature. or local effluents or local pollution due to solid waste in on a dumping ground, which leads to frequent fires or frequent uh, sting that spreads because of the gases, and people's healths are affected. That is basically a domestic external. The next is immediate versus delayed damages. Damages means where yesterday I showed you a particular type of damage function, okay, which is highly dangerous. So a small part of it will also have damage in the entire vicinity where it spreads. So that is immediate damage. Whereas delayed damage, it's a common problem. The abatement cost function, if you study the anatomy of it, then you will realize that measuring damages is not easy, because when the effluents are dumped in the environment, the damage is not likely to happen immediately. Okay, you never know because there's uncertainty. There is also time lag. Okay, where the damage will take place. So delayed damages. Some damages will come only after few years. You will not even realize. Okay, the last one in this list is tangible versus intangible damages. What are tangible damages? Damages are something that can be seen and measured also. Okay. Whereas intangible damages are something that cannot be seen but felt, and also difficult to measure. So tangible damage, in the earlier example, I said that deforestation, and due to deforestation last year in Chiprun, Vasishti River got flooded this year. This is just an example. So this is tangible because we can see the loss of property, we can measure the loss of property, we can measure the loss to the crops and other things, loss of life, loss of livestock, and so on. So the loss is generally measured by the government. The loss is generally measured by the district authority, conveyed to the state, and then you get compensation for all those who are affected due to these externalities, or due to these calamities which are due to deforestation, which is happening on the upstream. Okay, that is higher part. So maybe it is near Koina, or then you have that pass from Chiprun to coming to this side, that is Satara side, okay, or Karaj side. So that part there is huge deforestation that is taking place, and hence you may have this kind of flooding here. So just an example, okay. Uh, Intangible. What is intangible? Can you give me intangible loss? Something that cannot be measured or seen also. Hello. No, no answer. At least say no, we can't give any answer. Then I can go ahead. So, what is intangible damage? Intangible damage is something that, as I said, cannot be measured or cannot be easily seen, okay, but felt. So, when there is major lands which are deforested, or deforestation takes place, and you have conversion of these lands to, say, agriculture and commercial land, there is loss of green space, okay, which was aesthetically so nice to see. That loss is there. I cannot measure the loss, okay. Or as I told you that earlier, where we lived, we could see the uh, beach from there, or sea can be seen from there. Now because of the high rise around that place, that building is very small, 5 floors building, and there are 20-25 floors buildings which have come around that building. We cannot see it. That is loss of aesthetic loss, okay. So these kinds of losses cannot be measured, and these are also called as intangible damages, which cannot be easily measured. Okay, or there is um, yeah, loss of green spaces. You are not able to see the sky because of the high rise. These are all losses but cannot be easily measured. Okay, so if you look at public goods, the characteristics of public goods are basically non excludability, and here externality also. There is a problem of non excludability. You These non excludability seem to be at the center of the problem, that you're not able to exclude, or the cost of exclusion is very high. Technologically it is not feasible to exclude, and so on. Okay, so let's see how externalities are dealt with. This I've explained. Okay, so the question of internalizing externalities, I have told you that there could be a moral persuasion, that is called as moral suasion. Moral suasion means government, through its various media, or through its various interventions, tells people and the producers, etc. They will set up regulatory bodies, and regulatory bodies will also do advocacy regarding how to maintain pollution, and socially efficient level of emissions, and so on. Various measures are suggested. That is moral suasion. It is not just for producers, it is also for the consumers. Like for consumers also, uh, so many slogans that we have, so many through radio or through print media, through TV, so many messages are given by celebrities regarding how to save water, how to save environment, how to plant at least one tree you should, or five trees, whatever it is, should be planted so that we contribute to the environment. This is all moral suasion. But you can't just rely on moral suasion. So there are direct regulations, legal rules and procedures forming um, bodies to have certain mechanisms to directly control the polluters, or to make the polluters pay the price of it, and so on. So these could be the various ways of looking at it. Okay, so government imposition of taxes and government giving subsidies for certain things is one way. It is a way to create incentive for people not to add to pollution, or incentive for people to use the subsidies. Okay, and to switch to better or greener ways of production, or greener ways in which consumption activity can take place. Okay, the second way is what is being suggested by Ronald Coase, and that is private bargaining and negotiation. Now, Pigou said tax polluters, but Coase says that it is not the correct way of dealing with it. What can be done is, if the transaction costs are minimum, okay, of bringing people together and allowing them to bargain and negotiate, and if property rights can be clearly defined in favor of one, okay, or property rights can be assigned to one party, then you will have optimal solution, because the other party will have to pay to this party for use of these resources. Okay, and therefore it can become socially optimal. Legal rules and regulations is fixing standards, or some kind of procedures where each one has to follow it. Okay, it could be sale or auctioning. This I have already explained, so let's go to the next one. Okay, Pigouvian tax I have already explained, so I'm not spending time on it. Let's go to Coase theorem. Okay, so I hope you are clear about Pigouvian, and what is the criticism for Pigou that we did last time. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Pigouvian, the major criticism is people will pay tax and still pollute. Okay. So that could be one of the major criticism you can have of Pigou. And it also does not create a necessary framework of incentives and disincentive. Uh, and hence tax and subsidies. For example, if subsidies are given, you may have people taking subsidies, and that can create a adverse kind of framework. So that we have done in the earlier part. So let's get into the new area now, Coase theorem. Okay. So, Coase said that tax is unnecessary and sometimes it is undesirable also. Okay, why it is undesirable? Because according to him, if the transaction costs are zero, then you can bring parties on a single platform and they can negotiate with each other, and regardless of who is being given the property rights, whether it is the polluter or the victim, the initial allocation of property rights does not matter, and we will be able to get a optimal solution. Okay, so we'll take that with example. Let's understand what he is saying first. Okay, so according to him, if you assume that property rights are awarded to the polluter, okay, then the polluter, if the property rights are with the polluter, he is allowed to do waste disposal in the environmental media where the victims are getting affected. Okay, so the victims are the ones who are getting polluted air and water, and the victim here, as they do not have property rights, they can bribe or buy the clean air or water from the polluter. So they have to pay some price for the clean air or water from the polluter. Okay. Alternatively, if the property rights are with the victim, so if the stream is owned by a community together, then if you have a paper mill owner, then paper mill owner must go to the community and buy the property rights, so that the for whatever allowed to dump, okay, the pollutants, he will have to compensate the victims. That is with the that is if the rights are with the victims. Okay, so with minimum transaction cost, you will be able to do uh, with the minimum transaction cost, we will be able to do this regardless of whether the polluter had the right or the victim had the right. So I'm taking one example here. Let's take that example and then come back to this. Okay. So in this example, we have a fisherman and we have a factory. Okay. Now, we are talking about if we are talking about a property right with the factory, who is the polluter? Okay, and if he keeps on polluting the stream, there is a loss to the fisherman which is equal to say 10,000. Okay, so what does it mean? He has to give something to the factory so that the factory reduces its pollution, okay, or reduces its dumping of whatever effluents. So if cleaning equipment are available for 5,000, to avoid the loss of 10,000, what the fisherman can do is he can buy the equipment of 5,000 and give it to the factory. So here, if the factory, which is the polluter, has the right, the victim here is compensating, or victim here is buying the right to use the water by way of giving 5,000 rupees worth equipment to the factory. Okay. Now taking the case of a fisherman, if fisherman has the property right, okay, then to allow the factory, that is the factory should now seek property rights, or factory should seek right to pollute it by paying some compensation to the fishermen. So if the loss is 10,000, which means the factory will have to pay at least 10,000 and something additional, so that he allows him to use the stream for dumping the waste or effluents. Okay, so that instead of doing that, if the factory can purchase cleaning equipment for 5,000, it is better that it cleans the water and then dumps it instead of giving 10,000. So you can see in both the cases, what is the efficient solution? Whether initial property rights are with the factory or initial property rights are with the fishermen. The optimal solution is the factory purchases cleaning equipment worth 5,000 and the water is not polluted. So this is something, the basic idea of course. Now let's go back to the theoretical arguments that he is making. It becomes easier to understand. Okay. Uh, am I am I clear over here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Another example which he has used, I'm avoiding that because I can just say that example, fishermen's, and this is enough. But otherwise, he has given a example of a rancher or a farmer. Okay, that the herd which is owned by the or cattle which are owned by the rancher, they destroy the crops for the farmer. So same way solution can be found out if there is a if there is a if there is a negotiation. Okay. So and you course is saying the cost of negotiation is negligible. Okay. So when you can think that the cost of negotiation will be negligible, then you can identify very clearly who is the victim and who is the polluter. Then you can bring these polluter and victim together, make them talk, make them negotiate, and optimal solution uh, could be found. Okay, that is the idea behind Coase theorem. So one critical assumption is again and again we are saying transaction costs are insignificant, are negligible. Because when the transaction costs are taken into consideration, then apart from external cost, you have to add the transaction cost. Then the cost become higher. Then your damage function will change. Okay. So damage function change because external cost increases by the enforcement cost or a transaction cost. That you must keep in mind. Transaction costs are those costs which are involved in negotiation or agreement bringing both the parties to the table. Okay. So, transaction costs are difficult to measure if you have ambiguity in who is the victim, who is the polluter, and property rights are not very clear. Then transaction costs cannot be negligible. Okay. There could be bilateral agreements. Two people are involved in this kind of agreement. There could be two countries, two states, like you have Kaveri water problem and so on. Or there could be various countries in the context of international externality. You have two countries which are having this kind of uh, problem of externality. Okay. Information cost can also be very high, which is part of the transaction cost, but that he is not taking into consideration. Okay. Now, how many participants are there in negotiation that will change your game? If the parties are too many, then transaction cost increases. But he is saying that one way to reduce the transaction cost is to appoint an agent. Okay. So this is typically you will understand if I give you SRA's example. You know what is SRA? SRA is slum rehabilitation projects. Okay. Is authority. A stands for authority, but I'm talking about the project. So builder appoints some agent, and these agents go to slums and they say that if you are willing to be part of this project, then the land can be acquired, and then a building can come up where you will have your houses, whatever is the agreement between the agent, the contractor or builder, and the slum dwellers, and the other land can be used for commercial purposes, and there is cross subsidization generally which happens. So you need an agent to do this kind of agreement. Okay. So use of agent is expected, but you agent can have its own problems. What are the problems with the agents? That when agents are there and they come to the or when they go to these slum dwellers, uh, let's not just stick ourselves to slum dwellers. It could be an environmental externality in which victims are there. For example, due to deforestation done by a particular factory, there is flood water which has affected the property of the community at the downstream. Okay. So in case of these victims, they if they are initially asked to pay something to come to or prepare some documents or have a litigation and all, everybody will say that I don't want to contribute. Okay, because everybody wants to be a free rider. So that could be a problem. Everybody wants to share the benefits but do not want to incur the cost. So the problem of free rider might come. Okay. Now, there could be a problem from the individual sides that they are not able to identify who is the agent and who is the agent that will best represent their viewpoint. So, this is a typical problem in SRA also. You have big slums, various agents are there for various builders, and the slum dwellers are confused like whom to give their land, like house to get a new house in the building, because they're not sure about who is a genuine agent of the builder. Another problem is strategic behavior. Now, what is a strategic behavior? Strategic behavior can come from the polluter or the victim. Okay, so if it is a polluter, strategic behavior is I'm not responsible for all these kinds of externalities. And from the victim, so he will underestimate, and victim will always overestimate. Okay, because he wants compensation that is more, and polluter wants to give the compensation, so he has to pay, so he will underestimate. So this is called as what you say as the strategic behavior. Okay. Another problem in case of Coase theorem is become difficult because the externalities are not short term. Sometimes the externalities are happening over a long term. So effect of longevity we see. Okay, so damages do not happen only at one time. The damages happen over a long period of time. So how do you compensate? How do you uh, make the parties agree to have some kind of exchange or contract? Okay. In a political economy context, both victims or polluters may be involved in rent seeking activities, okay, for a legal regime change rather than spending their own resources on abatement. So, abatement, you know what is abatement? Abatement is basically incurring costs to reduce emission. Okay. Now, it is in the environmental context, it is the contribution that victim also should be making, should be making to have reduced negative consequences. Okay, but instead of that, everybody goes for rent seeking, in the sense goes for such activities where you want to avoid some making some payments and still get the benefit. So it is similar to free riding, but it is going beyond that. Okay, so in SRA context, these agents they catch some slum dwellers and say that you convince others, so I will give you something extra. So this is political economy where the victims also get into a mechanism where they are trying to get or pull out some benefits. This is typically known as, I don't know whether I have put it somewhere. There is something called environmental mugging. Okay. So, strategic behavior and environmental mugging, where you try to get into these illegal kind of activities and try to get the benefit for yourself more than what others are getting. So, that could be possible, and this is one of the I would say limitation of Coase theorem. Okay, uh, I can keep myself to that slide also because it is talking about drawbacks of Coase theorem. This I have explained. Okay. Yeah. So I was here rent seeking, which is a political economy problem in the context of a polluter. A polluter will also try to get some that is between it is possible because of some nexus between polluter and the government, and getting policies that would be in his benefit rather than in the benefit of the environmental quality or in the benefit of the victims. Okay, that is influencing the politicians or by bribing them to get something which is reducing his compensation. Okay, so that is avoiding to give compensation for the polluters, for the victims. I have taken this into consideration. I have given you two examples already. So, the in Coase theorem, to implement the Coase theorem, we assume that there are well-defined property rights and they're divisible and defendable also. This example I have given. So, let's talk about drawbacks of Coase theorem. Some drawbacks I have already discussed. Let's see some additional drawbacks that we have. Okay. So when you say that the property rights have to be well defined and divisible, obviously it means that when they are not, they cannot be divided or demarcated into private property, then it is not easy to fix the property rights and apply Coase theorem. So air is one of the problems. Okay. Another problem is when the resource within the property are mobile. Okay, it does not stay at one place. So groundwater or continental water basins or minerals which are there uh, below the surface. Okay, so you have surface land area which is owned by some people, and these resources are there beneath it. So there could be these problems of defining the property rights, or fish in the ocean. Okay, so if it is a international externality, you normally have these problems where Sri Lanka is catching our fishermen, or Pakistan is catching our fishermen, because they have entered into their water, and they have done the fishing which is according to them is illegal. So when it is mobile, the defining property rights becomes very difficult. Okay, we if we are talking about some if property rights are irrelevant to the environmental problem, then Coase theorem cannot be implemented. For example, you can talk about population explosion. Okay, population explosion is a kind of externality, but strengthening of property rights would hardly affect this trend. In fact, it would adverse this trend. Then, if you are saying that it is in the domain of the household, fertility decisions are in the domain of the household, then you cannot say that one child norm or two children, etc., are compulsory. Okay, so then in this case, the property rights argument would fail. If the polluters are the owners. Okay, sometimes if the polluters are owners, then in this case a socially optimal level of uh, pollution or emission can be obtained. That is what is said by the by Coase theorem, or application of Coase theorem implies that. But in US, if you see, the reverse trend is there. Each acre of land in US is owned by someone, but at the same time, you can find that there is ruining of land, or there is deforestation which is happening on a large scale. Okay, so property rights normally do not necessarily lead to controlling of externalities. Okay, farmers have property rights of their land, on their land, but farmers are still polluting with pesticides, and the kind of farming practices they have. There is soil erosion, and salinity of land is increasing, or soil poisoning through over irrigation is increasing, and the lands are becoming barren over the period of time. So Coase theorem is not necessarily an answer in all the cases. Okay, this part I have already taken, that strategic behavior and environmental mugging is unnecessarily influencing the victims, and trying to get mileage in terms of some benefits from the agreements. Okay, this could be done by agents, or this could be done by the polluters also. Okay. Uh, Now, the third point here, I'll just read. If firms are free to enter the market, the assignment of property rights to the firms and resulting profits from the sale of those rights might cause other polluting firm to enter the market. Okay, which means that if you are assigning the property rights to the polluters, okay, then other firms might get this as a signal that you can enter this market and you can get property rights, and then the overall pollution may go up. Okay, that is one thing. Whereas if you assign property rights to the victim, then the victims know that they will be getting compensation. Okay, they can create wealth through bargaining, and then new victims will come to the market. This is typically happens in the slum rehabilitation projects. That is, when you know that a slum rehabilitation is going to happen, some people, they want to create the wealth by selling the property at higher prices and go away, and new people will enter the market to get the advantage of the SRA project. Okay, so some more people might move to polluted neighborhood as a result of increased wealth from the sale of property rights. So you will see that some slums in Mumbai, the the prices of huts or small houses in such slums has crossed already at Bandra and Khar and all. I have heard that it has crossed already 1 CR. Okay, much more than that, because that was 2 3 years back, so it must have been much more than that. So why it has happens? Because of the wealth creation possibilities, polluters want this compensation, and they can enter in that area. So from both points of view, whether you are giving property rights to the polluter or property rights to the victims, there could be increase in the pollution due to these possibilities. Okay, so if you want to apply the Coase theorem, then you have to assume that there is no entry by the new firms and new victims. So if you are able to assume that and build a model in implementing the Coase theorem, maybe then you will be able to implement it. Okay. Now, transaction costs have been talked about a lot in Coase theorem. So, what are these transaction costs? So, these are the costs which are typically called as the cost of negotiation or the cost of coming to an agreement. It became very small. So this could be expenses involved in bringing many parties to an agreement, and apart from that, you sometimes you need to appoint an agent. So cost involved in appointing the agent, paying him salary, etc. There could be other costs like information cost, where you have to inform about the exchange on the regular basis, the kind of agreements which are possible, terms and conditions, etc., to both the parties involved on a continuous basis. So that is also cost. There are enclosure costs such as fencing the property. Apart from that, if property rights are assigned to one party, then you need to enclose the property. For example, in the case of a rancher and a farmer, if the farmer decides to fence once property rights are given to him, then enclosure costs are also involved in this. Okay. Then there are monitoring and policing costs. So in case of grazing land, if you assign the rights to one person, then how, if there are rules which are decided for grazing, okay, then somebody has to monitor whether these rules are followed or not. Okay, where the agreements, terms of the agreements are kept or not. So that is also important. And lastly, there are prosecution costs. So prosecution costs, if there are trespassers or violators of the agreement, then these costs are also need to be included or computed. Okay. So taking all these into consideration, then assuming that transaction costs are negligible seems a challenge. Okay, and therefore, Coase theorem, though very important, it has certain limitations of implementations, and the limitations mainly appear because of the number of parties that can be involved. So the number, if the number grows, the transaction cost may be higher, and transaction cost, if it is very complicated, too many things are to be included, then also you have increase in the cost of coming to a negotiation or coming to an agreement. Sorry, coming to an agreement. So this is what we have about the Coase theorem, and it can be applied in various contexts as far as the depletion of non-renewable resources are concerned. and we can talk about other ways of looking at the management of common property resources and open access resources. Okay, I believe that the reference that I have given has something on Coase theorem, but I would suggest if you get this book, okay, if you are coming to the campus, I have Xerox this chapter from Economic and the Global Environment by Charles Pearson. So what I did today, the diagrams, etc., are from Charles Pearson, and one diagram which I took earlier, where I showed you the uh, socially optimal level of output determination, and in terms of the marginal willingness to pay for a commodity and the marginal cost, and what implications it has on consumer surplus and producer surplus, all that part was there from this particular text. Okay, so in this book there is a chapter, if you can download, roots of environmental degradation. Okay, it is chapter 3 in that book. So if you can get a soft copy, please look at this. I'll repeat the name. It is Economics and the Global Environment by Charles Pearson. Please make a note of it. Okay. So just let me revise a bit that we have talked about. First, the context in which environmental degradation takes place. We have talked about two today. One is public goods. Okay, environmental quality is public goods, and in that context, what are the characteristics of this non-excludability, non-rivalness, and how these public goods can be further classified as something that is congested. Road becomes congested and start inflicting externalities on others. Every user starts inflicting externalities, external cost on others. uh, Also, there are and there are second instance of market failure is externalities. I have explained in detail types of externalities, so you can study from the exam point of view. Two things from today's class. One, what are the instances of market failure in the context of environmental degradation? That's first question. Second question is explain externalities and types of externalities in the context of environment. Okay. And third, how do you address the problem of externalities by way of using Pigouvian tax, and what is Coase theorem? What are the limitations of Coase theorem when it is used for addressing externalities? Okay. Now, in case of, I'll just repeat this point which I have explained yesterday, that when Pigouvian solution is possible, when source is identified very clearly, then maybe for government it is possible to use tax or subsidies, fiscal instrument, for addressing the problem of externalities. Okay, and when the number of victims and the number of polluters, okay, the property rights are violated, then assigning property rights and then coming to an agreement like in Coase theorem seems to be a possible solution. Whereas when we talk about common property resources, which I have not explained today, which I'll explain in the next class, the characteristics of common property resources and the solutions for managing common property resources is almost the last part. Okay, so that I'll explain in the next class. So for today's, I think I'll stop here, and maybe Tuesday I'll take a class. Monday I already have a class and one meeting, so it is not possible even. Uh, the class is late in the afternoon, and mornings I have something. So Tuesday I'll take your class and maybe wind up the second module also. Okay. I have already given chapter 4 and chapter 5 from Field's book as a reference, And today I'm giving chapter 3 as a reference from Charles Pearson. Okay, thank you so much. Any question?
Ma'am, could you just repeat the first question, please?
Oh, first question I also don't remember. Somebody must have written a task, no?
Okay, ma'am, we'll do that.
Okay, I don't remember the question. It was in the
Okay.
context of uh, what public goods and externalities, I think the first question. The second was on externalities, types, etc. The third was, anybody has noted the first question? Please repeat. Nobody
Ma'am,
has.
I'll look into it. No worries.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank
Thank you,
you.
ma'am. Thank you.
Bye, bye.